really early on Cursor, it is almost unusable, I think, but it is still the best of the bunch. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much out there that is obviously obvious stuff they could be doing better. Little UI tweaks, like the contact with the LLM is not always great, but it's still so much better than just like you know raw VS Code, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I haven't found VS Code's integration that great. I know they're working on it like crazy, and I have a feeling that eventually we'll all come sort of crawling back to VS Code, but for now I'm on Cursor for sure.
Yeah, I would say I'm split. I spend some of my time in Cursor and some in Windsurf because I like to compare. And
Mm,
I think the teams are shipping fast enough where some days it feels like it's worse than it was the day before. And I think
yeah.
and some days it's better. And so when I get frustrated with one, I will switch over to the other for a while and see if it's feeling better that day.
Well, you see
But
that with OpenAI as well. I mean, they try to change something. They try to make the 4.0 make the personality a bit friendlier, and it just goes haywire, and no one can use it anymore. So, I
yeah,
mean, with all these probabilistic systems, you're just banging your head against the wall, seeing what works.
exactly. I mean, that's why, maybe deterministic is better sometimes. But that's probably a good starting point. I know there'll be more filtering in. Thank you all for coming, and we will get started. I'll share my screen and we'll kick it off.
Sounds good.
All right. Give me 1 second here to get it all pulled up. And I'm going to be brave and share my entire desktop so you can all see when we write some code here in a little bit.
That never
All
goes wrong.
right. What's that?
That never goes wrong, I'm sure.
Yeah, never, and also, zero prep live demos never go wrong either. So I'm really excited. I did tell everyone on the team beforehand. I don't like I've done enough of these where I rarely get any kind of nervousness, but this one I'm feeling a slight bit more nervous than normal because there was no prep. I'm usually,
Yeah.
like have a little bit of prep. But let's get started. So thanks for joining, everyone. Our goal today is we're going to build an AI agent with MCP and Mastra. Maybe we'll build some agentic workflows. Really, we're going to try to see if, as an asterisk, maybe we can convert Matt from an agent framework skeptic to a believer. I don't know if it can be done, but we are going to give it our best try.
Hype
Uh,
for
so,
that.
who am I? I'm Shane Thomas. I'm one of the founders of Mastra. I was previously at Gatsby and Netlify. I built a product called Audio Feed. I've been doing open source stuff for over 15 years. And yeah, feel free to connect with me or follow me. And special guest today, Matt Pocock. He, I think the best summary of what he does, he teaches devs like me for a living. And author of Total TypeScript, AI Hero. I think you're working on something new as well, Matt. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, working on AI Hero at the minute. Going to release something paid on it soon. There's lots of free stuff on there, but yeah, something paid coming out very soon.
Any kind of rough timeline, or is it going to be a surprise?
Oh, I don't do timelines. I don't
Yeah,
do timelines. It's
yeah.
terrifying enough. I'm trying to get it out, and it is coming together for sure.
Cool. Well, yeah, make sure to connect with Matt on X as well. Follow him there and you can find out when it drops. So just a real quick intro to Mastra. I'll spend just a few minutes talking through what Mastra is, and then we'll just dive right into writing some code. So Mastra is open source AI agent framework specifically for TypeScript. It has the ability to build agents with tools, memory, tracing built in. It has state machine based workflows with human in the loop, ability to kind of like interrupt the workflow as you're kind of running it. We have evals built in, we have storage for RAG pipelines, and it's all kind of bundled into like a local development playground. So you can kind of play with it, build it locally, and then deploy it anywhere. That's it. That was the intro. Now we can spend the next 45 or so minutes just building something, and then we'll try to save about 10 minutes at the end for questions. Feel free to ask questions along the way. There are some other people from Mastra, Sam, I'm sure Abby's here as well. The other co-founders of Mastra can probably answer some of the chat questions as we go. But if we don't have time to answer it, we'll definitely try to find a few minutes at the end to answer some of your questions. And with that, let's build. So I think the first thing we want to probably do is maybe we'll just start on the Mastra website and we'll just follow. We'll open up the docs. We will open up the Mastra website, and we're just going to follow the basic instructions that the big button says. We're going to start completely fresh, uh, and just
You give us a bit of a zoom, Shane.
zoom. Yes, good call.
Yeah, zoom us in.
Is that a little better?
Yeah, better.
Yeah. And this one, yeah, as well.
Testing the docs live. Yeah, terrifying.
Is this viewable? I can always zoom a little more, maybe.
Yeah, touch more, touch more.
All right.
Can never zoom far enough.
Okay, so we're just going to run this, and what this is going to do is allow us to create a new master project on my local machine. I do want to maybe move into,
Yeah, doing it right in your home directory is quite a
yeah. I mean,
statement.
I
Yeah.
do, sometimes I'm brave. I don't want to be that brave today. We will go to my handy examples folder where I put all this stuff. All
Hmm.
right. What should we name this thing, Matt?
Matt Mastra app. Why not?
Matt.
So when this thing completes, what are we going to get?
So out of the box, what you get when you run this is you essentially get a kind of a standalone runnable server where you
Mhm.
can have agents that are available through endpoints. You can have workflows available through an API. So it's all kind of bundled into a REST API so you can deploy it anywhere and connect it to any front end, whether that's a mobile app, whether that's a Next.js website, whether that's,
Hmm.
what any basically any front end. A lot of times it's, a Telegram bot. Sometimes we have
Mm.
people using it for that as well, or, a WhatsApp bot. So it could be a Slack bot, all those different things that essentially allows you to, interact with an agent or a workflow. So
I've
we'll go
got
ahead and go ahead, Matt.
someone I know in the chat saying, Kieran saying it's based on Hono. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so Hono has various adapters for different kind of deploy targets, right? So you can deploy it to Vercel, deploy it to serverless, deploy it kind of anywhere you can deploy Hono, you can deploy this. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. Yeah. So you can,
Sweet. Okay.
you can build it and then deploy anywhere. And yeah, it's definitely, we definitely like Hono. It's great.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and just install, kind of everything just to get the example. We'll run the example and so you can see kind of the first thing. So we'll add agents and workflows, we'll add tools. Do you have preference between OpenAI or Anthropic?
Anthropic.
Anthropic. All right. And we will skip doing that key. We will add the example so we can just see something right away.
Hmm.
And so one of the other things that Mastra has is we have an MCP doc server. So a lot of times if you end up Google searching something or going to the docs and searching the docs, but if you're using Cursor or Windsurf or others, if you want to manually do it, you can install this. And then if you ask questions in your chat, it'll actually just search the docs for you. And that we found that was one of the problems is it's these LLMs are all trained on out-of-date knowledge, right? And
Hmm.
Master's pretty new, so it doesn't have the knowledge. And even if it did, it would probably be outdated because things are moving quickly.
Yeah.
So this kind of gives it the tools to look up the docs. It's also a very good test if the docs are working, because if it doesn't help you write code very well, the docs are not very well written.
I have a theory that every library is going to ship with this, and they're also going to have ones where, let's say, your React router is going to ship MCP, which has a command like migrate from React router from next to React router or something. You know what I mean? Everything's going to be prompts. I can feel it.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll do cursor since you said, Matt, that's what you're using most. We'll see how that goes today.
Cool.
And now I can just CD into this, and we'll just start with, the dev environment.
Hmm.
That way we can see it. And let me move some things around on my screen. All right, so you can see out of the box, we get, the API is running. We have the Swagger UI for the API, but we also have the actual playground itself.
Hmm.
So we'll go here and I will zoom in a little bit so we can see. And you can see we start with just this weather agent. Why don't we go ahead and try that? What what city are you in, Matt?
I'm in Oxford.
Oh,
Classic.
well, this makes sense. I do not have an API key, so I
If
didn't.
you if
And I
you
sent
zoom back
you
a
I sent you an API key via Slack if you're able to open
No,
it.
I got it. I have API keys stored and ready to go. I just forgot to copy it over.
very nice. Could you zoom back to where we were a second? Because I've just got a question there.
Yeah.
Which is what are we looking at here? What is this?
Yes.
Is this some sort of dashboard?
This is a local development playground, so you can test your agents as you're building them. So what
Hmm.
we'll do is we'll look at the code that actually makes this agent run, but at the end of the day, you're going to connect your agent to something, some kind of UI, some kind of front end that's going to interact with it. So this is essentially gives you that chat interface to iterate and test as you go. You can play around with
Hmm.
some things. It's very similar to what you get, when you're just playing around with an LLM on, Claude or ChatGPT. But this is your agent, and then you can actually write code and add tools to this agent and then deploy it. So it's kind of like your
Hmm.
local development playground. So you can see over here, tells you the name, gives you the provider. You can change some settings. You can decide if you want it to stream text or just generate it. You can see this one has a weather tool, which we'll look at what
Hmm.
that does. But let's see now. We'll just go ahead and refresh, and we'll see if this does better. Okay, so you can see it's checking the conditions. It ran that tool. You saw that kind of flash in, and now it
Hmm.
tells us, what the weather is. Assuming that's accurate, that seems kind of warm.
It's very warm here. Yeah,
Okay.
I've not got socks on. Yep.
All right. Now we see what's under the desk.
Oh, you don't want to know. You don't want to know.
All right, and now so we can kind of take a look at some of the traces here. We can see that we asked what's the weather in Oxford. This agent has some memory, but it got tools, and if we want to look at we can actually look at what happened and what was returned. So we
Mm.
can see, and if we go down here, it says it'll check the weather. It did a tool call, and it actually this is what the tool call returned, this data,
Yep.
and then it actually created created the response. So if we do
Yeah.
look,
Okay. So I've got some thoughts here, which is this is pretty cool, right? This development environment is sort of probably something you would have to code yourself if you're working on an agent, especially if it's an agent that doesn't have a front end already. And it's really nice that you get not only the tracing here, but you get the interface to actually deliver chat messages here. Because without this, you would have to set up, like, let's say, a third-party service like Langfuse or something to target your local development environment and actually like draw the stuff out of there. But you get this all out of the box. I'm itching to see some code, Shane. I want to see some code.
yeah, yeah, let's do it. Let's just see the code of what actually makes this weather agent run, and we'll go through some of the other stuff in the UI. But we are developers here. We like to build, so let's take a look.
Yeah.
All right, so as cursor loads, and we can take a look. Let me make this bigger.
Hmm.
So
A
you can
couple
see,
more pips of zoom there.
oh, no, how's that?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, nice.
Okay, so you can see it says this new MCP server is detected. So we're going to enable that just so we can have it kind of be an expert on the master docs. And again, we can show how that works. Basically, just adds this folder here, which tells cursor that you have an MCP server. We can look in source Mastra. That's where we told it to put our Mastra application. It's pretty clear what these probably are. It lines pretty well with the UI we were just looking at. So let's go ahead and dig into the agent itself. And let's take a look at what this does. So under the hood, we use AI SDK. So that's all the model routing and kind of how we wire up tools comes from AI SDK, but we built a lot of things on top of that, like kind of this abstraction for agents, memory, kind of improved tool calling, a whole bunch of different things. But I guess maybe here's the test, Matt. Maybe you explain to me what this code's doing.
You give me one more pip of zoom and I'll happily oblige. So, okay, we appear to be creating some sort of agent, which is coming from, if you highlight line 2, that's Master Core Agent. And we have a name, which is, I assume, something for the local development environment, probably for traces as well, picking up a weather agent. We have some instructions. Now, these instructions, I don't know whether these are a system prompt or some kind of user or assistant prompt. Like, I assume not assistant. You are a helpful weather agent. I mean, I'm getting system prompt vibes here from the role-based prompting and that kind of thing. Then if we zoom down, we've got a model being passed in, which is Anthropic, coming from, I assume if you go back to the imports at the top, AI SDK Anthropic. Yeah, okay. So that's, I assume, just being passed directly into the AI SDK sort of somewhere within this abstraction. Then we have tools, which feels, again, very AI SDK, where you have essentially a weather tool being passed in. I'd love to see the definition of that weather tool. Could we do a go to definition and head to it? Let's go somewhere.
Come on, come on. We'll just
Go on. Go on. There we
there
go.
we go.
Okay. So,
That's the wrong.
ooh, that's the wrong one.
That's the workflow. There we go. All right. So here's
Got
the weather tool
you.
definition.
So you're wrapping, I assume, AI SDK because AI SDK has a function that it exports called tool, but it seems like create tool is coming from your guys' SDK. So I'd love for you to explain why that is.
Yeah. So you can actually use AI SDK tools or Mastra tools. They're very, very similar. There's a few slight differences. I don't know if I know all the differences, but there are reasons we decided not to, just use or wrap AI SDKs tools. Here you get, kind of a ZOD-based input schema, output schema, and an execute function. So that way it's, very, we can kind of strongly type the tools as you're interacting with it. You know what, if you're interacting with the input or the output, you have the types there, and it's kind of a pure function, right? You know the input, you know the output.
I can add some more color. Hey, it's Abby. We also tools can be executed in other parts of our framework, like workflows. So we have like a standard format that is like interchangeable. So you could run a workflow. You're going to get into workflow soon, I'm sure, but you can run a like a step in a workflow as a tool. So like having that format, as well as if you notice on line 38 here, the execute function, we inject a lot of Mastra bits into that function. So you can also, like if you do comma Mastra, Shane, on the context there, like you have access to the Mastra instance. You can get more agents. You could do a lot of things. And then also we have like a runtime context. If you do comma runtime context, the third one, you can inject certain context everywhere through the application. So these are the reasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really nice. And that concept of runtime context that is kind of present in all of your tool calls, present in your, I assume, other places where it needs to be. That's something that's pretty cool and a pattern that I've seen again and again, actually. Okay, I think I understand the tools. If we go back to where the agent was defined, so I'm sort of treating you like an AI agent here, actually.
Yeah.
Apologies. I should be more.
No, I do. I think it's good because it's more real than if I just rushed through and explained all the different pieces. It's actually
Yeah.
a little bit more of like self-discovery.
So memory here, this is an intriguing one. I assume this is tilting at the idea that last messages, semantic recall, threads generate title. So my theory here is that there's a really hard problem to solve with chat apps in general, which is what happens when you like, in theory, you could use ChatGPT and just keep typing in the same chat thread forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, right? And that I've heard actually from people who run these companies that is sometimes what happens. People just don't use threads. They just literally just type in the same messages again and again and again. And you need to find some way to solve that, because if you just blindly pass all of those messages into your AI, then you're going to run out of context window extremely quickly. LMs have a very short, they have a defined context window, and eventually you will run through it. Whereas what I'm hoping this is something to solve that problem, where you're saying, let's say we only inject the last 10 messages or something, but I'm intrigued as to what it is. That's what came to mind. Now you give me the actual answer.
Yeah, you are absolutely right in the problem it's trying to solve. Now,
in.
how it does it, we try to provide you the dials to turn so you can kind of configure the memory without having to read, the MemGPT paper, or any of those, like do the memory research, right? So we give you some of the dials, so you can configure the last number of messages. There's more actually more dials you can turn here. Semantic recall would be if you want to essentially do like a vector search on your messages and pull in. You can pull in specific memories based on what the prompt is. So it'll pull in those memories, and you can actually get previous messages and following messages from what that specific message was from. So basically we store all the messages here. So what you don't see is kind of under the hood, there's a kind of a database storage engine that's running. And then when you deploy it, you can deploy it. If you want to use Master Cloud, we have that, or you just pick your database and you can kind of configure where this data gets stored. It gets stored right in your Postgres, right in your Supabase, your, MongoDB, wherever Upstash, if you want to, store some data there. So you can kind of configure where this actually gets stored when you deploy. But out of the box, it just runs, so you can get started and get kind of further faster, but then configure it when you're ready to deploy it.
Okay, I have a question that feels pressing, I suppose, which is you said that this is based on a Hono server, and Hono has a bunch of adapters that you can deploy everywhere. What other components do you need in order to deploy a master app? Because it sounds like it needs some sort of persistent data storage. Is there anything else, like a queuing system, anything else?
Those are the two biggest things you need are, yeah, so something that you can run the Hono servers. So it could be Vercel, could be Cloudflare. You pick your deployment target. You will need some kind of storage, and you have storage for things like memory, but you also have storage for things like workflow state. So if you have workflows that are maybe some kind of human in the loop interaction, you need to store the status of that workflow, pause it, wait for the human interaction, and then you resume that workflow. So typically, that's where you have to connect some kind of database engine. And there is so memory has storage, and then also Mastra itself, if I'm in the agent. Mastra itself has its own storage.
Well, you've got a
So,
Super Whisper trigger too.
oh, that's fun. So Mastra itself has its own storage. So if I go to kind of the source Mastra index file, you'll see essentially what powers this is we export this Mastra class, which that is what allows the server to run and all these things. But
This is your entry point.
this is the entry point, exactly. So you can see we have this weather workflow, which we haven't looked at. We have this weather agent. We have storage, which right now it's just because it's just running locally. It's just using this libsql in-memory storage. And then we have kind of configure logger and where you want those logs, what you want those logs to do. But this is where you'd essentially be able to configure it when you deploy it to use Postgres or Supabase, Mongo, something where you want all the workflow state and all the other things to kind of be stored.
Can I ask a question about the logger, which is how do you take these logs? Because obviously something that is incredibly important in AI apps is observability, right? You need to be able to see what's going on because you're contacting paid services all the time. It's a probabilistic system. Things go wrong. Things get weird. Can you I assume there's probably like a master cloud or something where you can take a look at this stuff in a dashboard. Yeah, go for it.
Yes. So we do have Master Cloud. It's in beta now. And basically what you see in the local playground, you get in cloud. But people are using all kinds of different observability tools. And so we also emit OTel. So you just connect it to any other AI observability provider that supports OTel, and you get your tracing. So, it could be Langfuse or Langsmith or keywords or any of those, right?
Lang.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's kind of the idea of like we have logs and we also have traces, right? And they're two separate things, but you can wire up both.
Makes sense.
All right, so let's maybe just take a quick look at what the tool's doing, just because at the end of the day, tools sound scary. It's just a function, right? This is just a JavaScript or TypeScript function that you can write. It's geocoding the location that gets passed in, and then it calls a weather API, and then it returns the structured data. And so that's the whole tool call. So pretty simple, overall of what it's trying to do. I guess
now what I'm really intrigued by next is you have a folder called agents and a folder called workflows. And it seems like these are two different first class concepts in Mastra. I'm really intrigued by that because I think of agents and workflows as kind of on the same spectrum, and there's kind of like a dial you can turn between them. So I'm really intrigued what you guys feel the difference is and how that is reflected in the API.
So my first comment is agents are what everyone wants, workflows are what everyone needs. And there's a space between those, right? You have how agentic you want something to be. And so what we really find is a lot of times people come in and they try to they allow the agent to do everything. And that can break down. I mean, it can work for certain things, but if you need a high level of accuracy and consistency, it can start to break down. So what we often see with people we talk to is they move parts of it out of the agent into these more discrete workflows, and then their workflows will just call the agent where it needs to. And so we see them as kind of working together, interrupting together. So you can essentially call your agents directly from steps in a workflow. You can run very just deterministic workflows and you get the same kind of tracing out of the box with every step of a workflow. I mean, maybe we can go ahead and just take a look at this one and see how it works. So maybe,
Okay.
yeah.
Should
So
I
maybe,
try and do my same trick again, which is to try to anticipate what the API is doing by reading it?
yes. Maybe first, let me show you the UI real quick, just so
Yeah,
you can
please.
see what the dev playground has, and then we will actually we'll dig into the code and have you walk through if the APIs make sense. So let's go back here. We're still zoomed, so we're good. If we go into workflows, we have a weather workflow here. It's pretty simple. It just has 2 steps. And we look at it, you can see it's going to fetch the weather. It's going to plan activities. So if we submit this and we run it, you can see it's running fetch weather. It's running plan activities. If I go to the CLI, it's probably, it's streaming out. It's kind of logging out its decision. So it's going to make a whole, activities. So if you're looking for something to do later, it is Thursday. It's saying, afternoon, the Oxford Botanic Garden visit. That's apparently something that it's recommending for you today.
It is very nice. Yeah. I mean, I've got to
But
put my son to bed,
essentially,
but yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a little late probably, but anyways, it does kind of just again take the weather for each day and plans out the trip, and then you can see here all basically the data that was kind of running. So it ran a fetch weather. Here's the success. Here's the output of each day. So you can see that. And then you can see the output of the plan activity step. And if I were to go to the trace, I can see it did the step fetch weather. This is how long it took. It did plan activities, and then it streamed the results. So if I were to look, this is what gets this is what gets passed in. And you can see it actually in this plan activity step, it's calling an agent, right? So it's a more discrete workflow, but there is kind of what we call an agent, which a lot of times, and I'll just be honest, we use agents a little more broadly. Sometimes it's just an LLM call, but wrapping it in and calling it an agent does give you all the tracing and observability out of the box. So even if it's just a simple LLM call, sometimes it's nice to have an agent with a defined system prompt, and then you get all the kind of the built-in observability pieces.
Yeah,
But
when Anthropic did this, they called this in their article "Building Effective Agents," which I recommend everyone reads. Things become canon very quickly in the AI space, but that is definitely one that is standing the test of time. They call this an augmented LLM, but that's not a particularly nice primitive, So yeah, I totally get that, and it's nice to actually have just a thing. The concept is the agent, and you can just call it and do things with it and compose APIs from it. So I get that.
yeah, and so we can go ahead and we can take a look at how that workflow is actually built. So in this one, I mean, feel free if you want to kind of talk through. This one is kind of a longer file, so I usually like to start at where you define the workflow, and if you can understand that, then we can kind of go backwards and see what the workflow is actually doing. So this is maybe
Yes. So new workflow, I assume, could you nip back up to the imports? I assume workflow is a first class thing coming from Mastra core workflows. I see. Okay. And you have steps as well as a first class thing, line 3 being imported. So nip back down and let's take a look at what that code was doing. So we had new workflow with a name, I assume for tracing, and a trigger schema. So this trigger schema, this feels to me like the workflow would be exposed possibly like on the public web, like or via your API, and then the trigger schema is the post body you would use in order to like trigger it. Does that sound right?
That's right.
Okay. And then step. So the step, now this is where like so I used to work on Xstate as part of the core team, and on Xstate we had a huge battle and a tension between wanting to be compliant with this really horrible spec called SCXML. Xstate is all about state charts, and that is just full of jargon and like nasty, nasty stuff. And then also wanting to put this in human language, right? So we have entered, I think, the jargon part of the API. So what is step? What does that mean?
So great question. Step is essentially, if you think of, a workflow as you're going to do multiple things, you're going to take multiple steps. A step is just a function that you want to run at a specific point in time. So it's
Okay.
in a workflow graph, you can think of it as kind of a node on a graph. One of the things one of our I guess positions with workflows, and actually like Xstate's a great example. I really enjoyed Xstate. We use it at Gatsby, but there's a learning curve. There's quite a bit of a learning curve to really understand it. And
Yep.
our thought is we wanted a more approachable entry point where you didn't have to learn, necessarily like state machines or graph theory. And so step is you run a step of a workflow and then you run another thing, and you saw in the UI of how that actually played out. But you might
So
do
is dot then? I assume this isn't like a promise-based API, right? This is you're creating a step and then you are creating another step. So is dot then? Could you just hover over the dot then just to see what it returns? Oh, that's a gnarly little type annotation.
yeah,
Just trying to close brackets. Okay, yeah. So I see. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
like these builder patterns are always a bit gnarly.
Yeah. So the way that it works, so I could also run dot step plan activities instead of
Okay.
dot then, and this would run these two steps in parallel. So they'd run them at the same time. But then basically just says, I want to, once this is done, then run something else. And I could, do other things such as branching, where I could have, a condition that says, if this, then run this branch, which could be a whole nother workflow, or it could be a series of steps. And otherwise, if this happens, then do this other branch, and maybe come back and merge the results after those two branches run. Things like that.
Mm.
What we've really, one of the things we've seen is this is actually, I believe, if I look at it, we actually redesigned this API a little bit, and we have something called vNext, which is going to be coming out. It's available now, but you kind of have to opt into it, because what we realize is two things with our workflows. One, it's very approachable for this. Like you can kind of read this and understand, if I get down to it, what this is doing pretty easily. But it still can get pretty gnarly for those really complex workflows, which we had a lot of our users and customers try to build. And so we kind of redesigned the APIs a little bit to make it cleaner for those more complex use cases. So you can have cleaner branching, easier human in the loop interactions. And the other thing that the vNext version of our workflows is, right now this is all 100% based on Xstate, but we did want to make sure that the vNext version, you could deploy it and use Cloudflare workers, you could use temporal, you could use ingest, and so now you can deploy to those different kind of like deploy targets as well to actually run these workflows.
This
So
strikes me as like one of the most difficult challenges you guys have is representing all of the things that you can do imperatively in code in a declarative way, right? Like this is a tricky API to get right. So I imagine this will be part of where like there will be an element of churn here, right? You'll be like trying to get this right again and again and again. And eventually you'll probably find something that looks good. And there'll probably be some like, like many ways of doing the same thing, possibly too. That's intriguing. That's intriguing.
yeah, I think
it's a tough problem to solve.
yeah, for sure. And we've spent Tony on our team has spent so much time just on this one API, just hitting his head, working with, like sharing it with people in our Discord, getting feedback. And so that's why we kind of had to redo, I would say VNext is kind of like a redo in a way. A lot of the same things exist, but there are some breaking changes that are different enough because we just didn't get it right the first time. And I do think that, that VNext is the next version, but you're probably right that it's going to take multiple iterations over, an extended period of time to really get something that is, again, we want it to be easily approachable, but still be able to scale to, pretty complex use cases and then still allow you to kind of break it into sub workflows when you get to those really gnarly, complex use cases as well.
So I had just one more question, which is if you go back to where we were and then head to the dot then, remove the colon, the semicolon at the end and just press dot because I just want to see what is available on the autocomplete here. Yeah, so we got after, commit, create, run, else. That's fun. So there's an element of if else logic there. Get run, get stay. If is nested. Woof. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Resume, step. Wow, okay. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff available here. So okay. So I imagine yeah. So I can feel my skeptical self start to come up, right? Because I assume there's like an element here that you want a declarative API here so that you can drive some of the more visual elements of like the dashboard and things, right? You want to be able to, because I can see that you declare this here. So you declare weather workflow.step.then, and then you have another step of like weather workflow.commit at the bottom where I assume it sort of just like collects everything up and you're good to go.
Yes.
And like normal code, imperative code is really hard to statically analyze and get any like beautiful graphs out of. So there's a constraint there between you're pulling between on one side, we want to allow the users to do anything they want, but we also want it to be statically analyzable and visualizable. Is that sort of an accurate?
Yes. And what you'll often find yourself in, and this is one of the challenges we currently face, or I think we'll always face, is how much logic do you just want to put into a single step, right? Well, you could just write all this logic yourself, but there is, especially when you're trying to debug and rerun pieces of a workflow, having things broken out into smaller, more discrete, kind of visualizable units does make maintenance and debugging easier. But there is kind of this, and you probably experienced that too with, Xstate, right? You don't have to use a state machine. You could just write code, but there are benefits to being if you do spend the time to break it into like a reusable, state machine that can be, you can transition between different states and move between those things very easily.
Yeah, that tension feels very familiar to me for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right, well, we'll say about 10 to maybe 15 more minutes. We can go a little longer before we go for questions. Where do you want to go next? We kind of looked at some of the basic primitives. We can kind of pull up here. We did talk through tools. We can test tools in isolation. So I can just run this code, and that way I can make sure the tool works before I hand it to the agent. That's typically what we recommend. We could try to add some extra ability to our agents. Maybe attach an MCP tool or something. Pull in something like that.
I had something I'd love to see, which is I saw a very intriguing menu item. If you go back to agents, I think on the left toolbar, there was, and click into weather agents, there was evals at the top there. I'd love to just get an overview of what you're doing there, because that seems intriguing.
Yes. So we like to break evals into kind of two things. You have kind of your what we consider live evals, which run after your agent makes decisions, and those things can be things that you want to score on. Oftentimes it'll be an LLM judging the results. So you'll have an LLM call, and then you'll use some kind of LLM as a judge to create some kind of scoring rubric. And we can actually maybe just look at the docs for evals here. If I can find it. There it is. So see what the best way to maybe show this. This is yeah. So you can attach specific evals to your agent, and what will happen when you attach these evals is every time your agent has is generate or stream called on it, it will then run these evals after the fact. So it won't be blocking after it's done. It'll run it, and then you'll have, each of these evals typically will return a score, and then we can score that here. So we could actually try one if you want to just do a simple eval.
So if I get this right, then you're, and feel free to just sort of like busy yourself while I kind of like double explain it for you.
Yeah.
You're essentially providing yourself in the dashboard some automatic labeling and classification of what you've observed in your application. So it's like you're saying, okay, I mean, this is a really great way to monitor your app in production, because you can do things like, okay, we returned a bad response. Our evals automatically detected it, and then that goes and pings, let's say, a Slack channel and says, okay, there's like a bad thing that happened in our application. So these evals are kind of like scoring your app based on, did we do a good job or not?
Yes, exactly. And we have quite a few what we call like out of the box evals. Um, it the out of the box evals, your mileage may vary. They're helpful for some things, but also I often think writing your own evals that kind of tie closer to business logic is what I would typically recommend. But we support both, and so depending on what you need, we do kind of have support for both of those things.
Yeah.
Let's just see.
Yeah,
Uh,
I feel a bit suspicious about pre-made evals,
eh,
like,
yeah, I would. Yeah, and again, typically why I like to say we have them, but I don't know. Like I wouldn't. Maybe you start with them just to see how it works, but then typically you want to spend your time. Honestly, you probably spend as much time writing evals, maybe more time writing evals than you do writing software tests, in my opinion, with these more probabilistic, less deterministic systems.
yeah, I would say even more than actually writing feature code.
Yeah, yeah, I would exactly. So if we look at this, these are just like NLP metrics, which again, I don't think they provide that much value, but we'll just show them. This one's actually doing an LLM, and I don't, if we look at summarization metric, I don't even know if I know what that really means. So I'd have to look at in the docs and see which metrics we actually have here. Um, let's see if we have.
Why don't you get those working, and I can scan for some interesting ones that might be relevant.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, feel free to dig through that, and we'll just show that these work. So we'll save it. We'll need to rerun our dev server. I did have to install the evals package,
Okay, makes sense.
and just kind of followed the simple docs there. And let's go ahead and just say, you know, just something simple. How are you doing today? Just to see what it does. Well, it can only help me with the weather. I'm in Sioux Falls. Let's see if you can respond to that. And then this can take a few seconds because especially it's calling another LLM to judge the results of this behind the scenes. So we'll give it a second. We can click here. You can see this one only has one. It'll eventually be two if I refresh here in a second. There it is. So we can see our average score. Doesn't seem very good, but we can look and see. And this says, your helpful weather assistant. It gave this one a 0.96. It gave this one a 0.98. Again, these are just kind of like natural language processing scores. So I don't, yeah. Your
So, but
mileage is good.
if we imagine a production use case here, where you would say, let's say you were answering a user's question, going out and searching some information, providing it back, you might have an eval that said how relevant was the answer to the user's question, right?
Yes.
And so that would be an LLM thing, and you would be able to monitor that live in your application, is the theory.
Yeah. So we have an answer relevancy metric. Let's just use that one because that one is that's probably better for this specific
Got you. That's built in.
one.
Very nice.
And so we can do answer relevancy. That's fine. I think we need the model here as well.
Yeah.
And
Stick it in. Cool.
yeah, let's just make sure because some of these.
It is really nice that you don't assume a model there. Other eval libraries like Brain Trust, for instance, just sort of assume OpenAI.
Yeah, you just pass in. Yeah, again, you pass in what model you want to be the judge, and then you kind of give it the score. So we could do uncertainty weight. Why don't we just and that doesn't matter. We can add this. That gives it like the scale is 0 to 1, uncertainty weight. I would have to actually look and see what that actually does, but it's good to show that you can have some.
Yeah, put it on the
That's
other one.
being passed into answer relevancy.
Oh, there we go. Wrong one.
I think you know what though, Shane. I think I get the idea, which is
Yeah.
and I hope folks in the chat also get the idea, which is you have these metrics that just sort of watch over your app like guardian angels, giving you more context over what the data is. And often with LLM as a judge, you don't really need it as like a hard eval, like we don't ship our app until we do this. It's more like pointing out when something went wrong in production, right? It's like a sort of, oh, there's something a bit weird about this, you know?
Yeah. And we do support, because we kind of look at it, there's typically two ways, our users want to use this. The first is they want to monitor what's going on in production, right? They want to know that over time they are monitoring things and seeing if for some reason their scores are dropping a little bit. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe they made a change and now they're seeing that it's degrading a little bit and they've got to figure out why. The other thing is we often see people basically create a data set and wire up these evals and just call these evals directly on like a CI pipeline. And so, you're not typically blocking merges on those things, but you are just checking over time that something doesn't seem too far off of the norm. And so you're not regressing in your changes, especially when you're changing the prompt. So you might wire up your GitHub action just to only, if it's only certain files that store your prompts, change. Well, then let's run the whole eval suite and you have a data set and then you get some kind of score on that.
So Shane, I wonder if maybe the last thing we could do is just have a look at the Swagger API definition and just tie this all up, see how you would actually like call this in production.
All right, so here it is. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, this I haven't actually seen a Swagger definition since I worked on a really, really nasty project in like 2018. So this is sort of bringing back bad memories, but I'm sure it's good. I'm sure it's good. So if you go to Wolf API agents agent ID generate, the first of the post calls just there. So okay, interesting. So you actually get different API endpoints for stream and generate. Is that right? Because if you close that tab just there, there's one below it that says stream. Interesting, interesting. If we zoom down a little touch, I can see things like speak, voice stuff as well. So what you're exposing here is lots of different API endpoints that all have, I guess, pre-made behavior.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, and you mentioned voice and speak, so you can, in your agent definition, you can actually give it, the ability to, text to speech provider. So you can actually, have text convert to speech, and it can talk back to you, or a speech to text, so it can kind of like you can you can send it audio, and it'll actually like convert that to text for you. So if you wire that up, we like to think of agents as like there's certain levels of autonomy, right? And if you think of an agent as kind of a human in some ways, right, or some kind of like humanoid, they should have the ability to talk. So we want to give that, and that's why we have the speech primitives there as well.
That
But
makes sense.
yeah, so you're right though that generate and stream are separate, and that's just because sometimes if it's built into some kind of other workflow engine, you just want to kick it off and you can wait for it or whatever. It's not immediately needing to feed back to the user, but a stream, of course, if you need that immediate user feedback. And dealing with streams is never, is not always fun, so you don't have to do it if your application doesn't call for it.
So I wonder whether I should just say some of my thoughts here.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
kind of
Maybe
like
we
bring
can
us
spend a
into
few
a
minutes.
conclusion.
Yeah, spend a few minutes wrapping up, and then we can answer some questions if we have some.
Yeah.
I see a lot. I see a very active chat.
So I think the things that I really like about this are, first of all, the dashboard. If you could navigate back over to the dashboard, having a local development environment for this stuff feels really, really sweet. And having, I don't personally see the appeal of like, this is weird from an X-State core member, but like having a lot of this stuff visualizable, you know, like I sort of I see the tension there, and like what I really like here is that I really like the agent primitive. I really like that you have an agent that you can like put into different boxes that you can run evals on that is automatically traced. That feels really strong and really compelling, actually. I think my suspicion is I would end up using this in a way that sort of circumvented the workflows API, and I would just sort of like try to call my agents imperatively, which I assume is an API you support too.
Yeah.
The way you deploy this is still a little bit fuzzy in my head. I mean, you obviously deploy it somewhere. You put it on some URL. I assume there's some kind of authentication thing. There's like you can authenticate to it, and I mean, the managed endpoints feel a little bit fuzzy to me again, but we didn't really cover it that much. My emotion, I suppose, if I were to sum it up, is intrigued and surprised, because you've sort of like you've got a lot of tooling here that you just don't get unless you're using a framework. Like it's really nice that you guys have sort of I'm not sure of your approach, but it feels like you've sort of like thought, okay, what tooling do we want to have? Like what tooling is necessary, really nice for a development workflow, and then sort of built back from there. And that feels really appealing. So, okay. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed. I have to say, I'm pretty impressed. And I like you obviously get a lot more here from being a framework instead of just like cobbling together little libraries. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean that's good to hear. You know, definitely as you think through this more and as you know, maybe play around with it yourself, of course, hit us with the hard stuff, the stuff that doesn't make sense, because you know, we are moving really fast, and so we are, you know, we're learning things too. So maybe we can answer some questions. I know Abby, you look like you've been all over in the chat. And for those of you, I know, you know, I'm trying to see how many people we actually still have on here. So we had over 100 people. That's cool. If you
Yeah,
do,
110 still here.
yeah, and this will be this is recorded, so you will get, you know, the recording in your email in usually a few hours after this. But let's maybe any other questions. I'm just trying to catch up. There's hundreds of questions here. So Sam or Abby, if there's any that were interesting that we should call out, or any that you haven't had a chance to answer, feel free to just jump on and yeah, let us know.
Um, we forgot to talk about MCP is a big, I guess not a question, but a statement from the community here.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to quickly do that, or maybe we just do another time.
I'll show the docs for it. I don't think we have time, but we have, you know, I'll take a minute just to show. So MCP, everyone here's heard of it. We wanted to support it directly because you should be able to connect your MCP tools just like the tools that you write. So in Mastra, you can write your own tools. They're just functions. You can call an API. You can do whatever you want with it. But you can also just grab our MCP client, use any of the MCP registries, which we also on we have an MCP registry on our website. So we have a list of just all the you know, most of the registries are here. You know, if there's a popular one that's not here, you can PR it, we get it added. But there's a lot of choice, right? When you're deciding between registries or tools. And so you can connect to anyone you want. And then when you actually provide it, you just can provide this thing as a set of tools. So you can be selective and only grab specific tools from that MCP server, or you can just, you know, give them all the tools, depending on how selective you want to be. But essentially, you're just giving the agent your MCP tools, and it can then interact with those just like it would any other tool that you've provided it.
I suppose I have one question before we go. Since like the chat, Abby has been really active in the chat and replying to questions, which is great. Which is how is Mastra planning to make money? I suppose is my question. It like the cloud offering is a very direct way to essentially sell people on Mastra, I suppose, and that's sort of bundled in. And I assume you'll have some customers who just go, yeah, I want to go all in on Mastra. Let's just do the easy way, the quick way. here is my money, and then you have others that sort of use part of Mastra and then unbundle and use other services, let's say, or in-house stuff. Is that kind of like the idea?
Yes, exactly. A lot of people come with their own projects, their own tools that they already have. And so one of our, goals is to make sure we can integrate with pretty much anything. So you can kind of pick a different storage provider. You can pick a different observability provider. You have that flexibility. You can pick a deployment, provider as well. But there's a lot of people who don't know what to pick yet, and so we want to provide the easy path. And then maybe there are certain things you want to eventually pull in or kind of eject out of, but we want to provide that kind of all-in-one place where you can deploy to. You have the observability built in. You have the API that you can just call, and it'll scale to your needs. And but you have the flexibility where you can use anything you want. We just make it really easy.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got the first class and then you've got the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes total sense. Every dev tool company is an infra company. That's a great comment from Cameron. Yeah, really nice.
Yes.
Well, Shane, thank you so much. That was really informative and intriguing and other in words. So yeah, brilliant stuff. Really nice demonstration.
And so feel free, if you haven't given us a star on GitHub, you can also request access to our Master Cloud. Our Discord is very active, so if you have questions along the way, it's a great place to go. Please connect with Matt and myself on X or Twitter. I don't know what people call it these days, but whichever you call it, you can find us there. And keep an eye out for Matt's upcoming course. I'm excited to see what happens there. And we also are hosting a hackathon on May 12th to the 16th. So it's kind of build on your own pace. You can build a team, you can form teams in our Discord, but come build agents. We'll help you out. We'll have some office hours. We'll have some kickoff sessions. We just want to see what cool things you all want to build, and we'll help you along the way. So you can sign up for that. Just go to master.build and register there. And with that, any parting words, Matt? Anything else that you wanna say in the last 60 seconds or so?
No, I don't think so. That was really nice, Shane. I will be looking into this further. I think you've definitely sold me on elements of this. I retain a bit of skepticism, but I like my skepticism. I'm going to keep it close. But this was pretty nice. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining in too. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was great to see you all, some familiar faces and some new faces, and we will see you all next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Peace.